now take you to the broadcast of It's Time with Reverend Nathaniel W.Martin. Here is Reverend Martin.
Thank you, Dr. Blackwell. Let me say good morning, good afternoon, good evening, certainly never good night, and never ever goodbye. I'm Pastor Nathaniel W.Martin, the pastor of the New Life Institutional Baptist Church here in the city of Los Angeles. And we're located at 8916 South Main Street. And the offering that you are looking at now is a presentation entitled It's Time. And the question must be asked, what is it time for? Well, it is always time for social justice. The social justice must always include the environmental injustice as well as economic injustice. And we know that the fight is long and the opposition is great, but that doesn't mean that we are not correct and right and moral in our quest for reparations and for social justice and social equity, as we define social justice and social equity. Let me quickly go to our scriptures before we begin our discussion. A little bit different today. Our reparations text is found in Deuteronomy chapter 15, picking up the reading at verse number 12. And this is what it says. And if thy brother, an Hebrew man or an Hebrew woman, be sold unto thee and serve thee 12 years, then in the 7th year thou shalt let him or her, mind you, go free from thee. And when thou sendest him or her out free from thee, thou shalt not send them away empty, but thou shalt furnish him or her liberally out of thy flock, and out of thy floor, and out of thy out of thy winepress, of that wherewith the Lord thy God hath blessed thee, thou shalt bless them. Okay? All right. And so that is what God looks at for beginning of reparation. Reparation were to be paid at the end of the episode or event or period of enslavement. One was not to send a slave away empty-handed, as was done here in this Christian nation. And that's a lot of empty-handedness to leave on the table. 246 years worth of slave hour days, which sometimes could almost run into 24 hours for 246 years. Even if we were charitable and say possibly the slave only had to work 16 or maybe 18 hours a day on an average, that's still a lot of money, a lot of hours, a lot of sweat, a lot of toil left on the table. God never intended for slavery to be longer than 7 years, according to the scriptures. You can argue with the text if you would like. 6 years good labor, 7th year get ready for the year of Jubilee. That's in the scripture, that's in the Bible. Slaves were not to lose their identity, their culture, their heritage, and their language, or even their religion, as was practiced in this country, where parents were separated from their children, children were separated from each other, and indeed husbands and wives found themselves sold off to various and sundry other plantations and locations around the country, around the Union, as it were. And so there is a huge disparity and a huge differential, a behavioral differential, and yes, a pay differential that has yet to be rectified. The books have not yet been cleared. The ledger for slave wages has yet to be remedied. And so those wages have got to be paid. We know that the slave owners were paid, but that money should have gone to the slaves who actually did the labor. Irrespective of Judge Taney's Dred Scott decision, which led finally to the Civil War, which actually ended slavery, and independent of the constitutional contradiction that recognized the 3/5 clause, which said that persons held to labor or service were only to be counted as 3/5 and not as a whole person for the sake of the representation. And so there is a huge injustice, a great moral turpitude, if you will, moral lapse, by all means, as who I believe was Dr. King, who said there is a great hypertension of promises, but a huge anemia of practice. And so as we come to the end of this very year, 2020, with this terrible pandemic that has claimed gargantuan numbers of our own citizens, a lot of it based upon the ineptitude and the dereliction of duty of the current incumbent of the White House, Mr. Donald J. Trump, includes, of course, his lax warning, his lax alerting of the nation, and then, of course, his entire attitude toward the virus, as though he failed to recognize that it was not just him personally, but it was the nation as a whole that was being affected by his inaction. All right, and so that brings us to our consideration of our healthcare system and of the disparity already existing between the health outcomes in hospital of white patients and the health outcomes in hospital of black patients. And before we say, well, you know, the black folks don't have any money for insurance, no, come to find out that the health disparities were greater among the so-called blacks and that actually had good health care on the job and good private health care, but yet their health outcomes were questionable. Same doctor, same hospital, different outcome. Something is wrong. Something is terribly wrong. I acquainted you, I believe, a few weeks ago that of a lawyer, a scholar, a professor, law professor, Harvard professor, and City University of New York professor, and dean of the Law School of Oregon, by the name of Dr. Derek Bell, who is, of course, now long deceased, who presented a novel theory called critical race theory. And his critical race theory had 5 basic tenets, one of which was that racism is a permanent characteristic or factor in American life. That you will not get over it, not get around it, it is permanent. And so we have to continue to deal with it, to make strategies like Black Lives Matter, and make inroads to try to push back against this crushing weight of racism. And before you say, well, no, we know racism is not permanent, remember that all of our advances have been accomplished at great sacrifice, after long, hard years of struggle and of blood, sweat, treasure, only to find out when we make a little incremental advance that it is shortly pushed back, overturned, undermined, and the subsequent consequent new condition is worse or equal to that as it was at the fore. Case in point, how diligently, how arduously the late President Ronald Reagan worked to undermine and turn back all of the gains of the civil rights struggle. But yet, in spite of him saying on TV and making it known that he did not see where Martin Luther King deserved a national holiday, and he wanted to open up the files to begin a research and investigation into the life of Dr. Martin Luther King. As you know, he tried to throw, he being President Reagan, attempted to throw some shade upon, as we call it shade today, it was disgrace, opprobrium, upon the name and legacy of Dr. King. And in spite of him, Miss Coretta Scott King, along with John Conyers, Louis Stokes, and just armies of people who labored, including the entertainer Stevie Wonder. They prevail. And the Congress, both houses of Congress, passed the law for making Martin Luther King's birthday a national holiday. And whose signature is on it? Why, Ronald Reagan. He could have vetoed it, but he knew better. And that is what Dr. Derek Bell called an instance of interest convergence. It was in the interest of the nation to let Dr. King's holiday go forward. And so it was, as you notice, even today, it is observed, more in the breach than in the observance. I think I might have messed up a metaphor there. But the point is that symbol was given unto us. And on King Day, we're of course supposed to reflect and ponder, meditate, ruminate over the legacy and the life, the teaching, the doctrine, the philosophy of the late Dr. Martin Luther King, as we prepare to continue in this, what he called, beautiful struggle. Dr. Derek Bell felt that blacks are more likely to obtain relief even for an acknowledged racial injustice when that relief also serves directly or indirectly to further ends which policymakers perceive are in the best interest of the country. A King holiday was in the best interest of this country worldwide. It makes the whole world look at America as a beacon of hope. Remember, America is a boast that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, and among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Of course, that word happiness was a substitute, an ersatz, for the original word, which was property. Only reason that word property was removed was because of the fact at that time property, the best property in the colonies and in the in the Union, was found in human property, in human capital, in slavery, in other words. For those of you that don't get it, and so the pursuit of property opened up too many cans of worms. We'll settle for that metaphor. And so the word happiness was substituted for property. And of course, at the time of the signing of the Constitution, well, most of the 56 of the signers of the Declaration of Independence were slaveholders. Many of the signers of the Constitution were likewise slaveholders. They had property in human persons. In other words, what they call chattel slavery, my personal property, chattel slavery. A slave, a human being is my personal property, and I may do with that person as I will. Taking into consideration that this nation at that time was a nation dominated by the white landed class, not the landless white, but the landed white, who had not only owned property in land, but property in slaves. And starting from that, you can see that the nation could not help but go downhill, as it did indeed, ending in a bloody civil war beginning in 1860 and only ending some years later in the beginning in, well, it was 1860 because when Lincoln was elected, that was the lick that broke the camel's back. And so really, like I say, the beginning of 1861 all the way through April of 1865, this nation was fighting against its own self, against its own thrashings and strugglings inwardly against those who said slavery is right and those who said slavery is wrong, those who said property in men is just and those who said property in men is unjust. And that dichotomy could not continue. You cannot have a nation half slave and half free, as even Abraham Lincoln said and acknowledged and admitted. Either you will become all one or you will become all the other. But you will not remain divided. We'll come together. Either slavery will take over, or else those who oppose slavery will put it in a position where it can be on its way to extinction. In other words, if you start wrong, you're going to end wrong. And so what has persisted all through past slavery and into the postbellum years on down to right now is that the bitterness of the defeated Confederacy, those of the South, and the sheer racism in the hearts of those of the North, and the sheer desire for greed and profit that overruled the command to look after one another, value one another's burdens. Profit motives overruled, and by 1877 you have the Hayes-Tilden election, and the promise by Hayes that if he was elected president, that he would shortly remove all federal troops from the South, and the South could do as they would with the slave question, and that the North and the South, the Northern capital and the Southern hierarchy could get back to doing business as they would. And that is why Dr. Derek Bell feels that racism will not be eliminated from this nation, that is too endemic, it is too intrinsic, and partially because it is too profitable. Why, it is very profitable for real estate people to deny so-called blacks the access to the FHA loans that became available after the Second World War. How was it profitable? Why, you allowed the white people to have the suburbs, and then you could charge whatever you wanted to the people who were homeless and houseless, but they had money, but because of their skin color, not because of their credit score, but because of their skin color, they were denied access into that FHA revenue stream where the government was underwriting and subsidizing the housing all across this great nation for the veterans and the GIs returning home for the Civil War. Did I say veterans and GIs? I meant white veterans. I meant white GIs returning home from the Great World War II. Sometimes I overspeak. And so racism paid. If a black person wanted somewhere to stay, then he had to be willing to pay with his arm and a leg to get a dump, just like people today are paying exorbitant sums of rent for a one-bedroom or two-bedroom apartment because of the scarcity and because of the need. Then quite naturally, the real estate agents and brokers and the industry realized a huge bonanza. And when that thing turned around in 1968, when Lyndon Baines Johnson started the Great Society program and changed the name of the Federal Housing Administration to the Fair Housing Administration, then the descendants of those same real estate brokers and agents who had blocked black people from buying in the original sale of housing, now turn around and began to issue subprime loans to the descendants of those original black people who were not able to buy a house and had to rent and pay exorbitant rents. If they tried to buy a house, it was on a contract, and if you missed one payment, you could lose everything that you got. What am I saying? What Dr. Bell is saying. Bell said racism has been very, very profitable here in the United States of America. It's profitable in real estate. It's profitable in housing. It is profitable. I didn't finish my illustration on the subprime lending. So if I couldn't get a loan in the first place, and then we come back along now in the late 1990s and the like, and all of a sudden we say, okay, now you can buy a house here, but it's going to cost you a higher APR, and it's going to cost you a higher down payment, or else you can get in there with no money down, or 10% down, or 5% down, and you just give me a little something under the table. We call that origination fee, and we'll get you in what you call a mortgage that is adjustable. An adjustable mortgage is one of the most dangerous mortgages that you could have, because it starts out low, 2%, but after 3 years, maybe not as much as 3 years, maybe just 2 years, but no more than 5 years, and all of a sudden it jumps from that 2% to what? 10%. Now instead of you paying $1,500 a month for that mortgage, now you got to pay maybe $3,000 or $35,000 or $4,000, depending on the home that you have purchased. And of course, when the downturn hit, then who was the most affected? Who was the most egregiously, financially, and economically, as it relates to wealth, affected? It was those who had most recently began to climb up the ladder toward the American dream of home ownership. And they thousands of people, thousands of black people lost their houses. They lost everything that they had put in it. They had lost everything they had raked and scraped. They just lost all of that wealth. And who got that wealth? Why, Goldman Sachs, Citicorp, Countrywide. What was the name of the stockbroker country? company that failed, not Bear Stearns, but the Lehman Brothers. All of those people, they made the money. Yes. And so in 2008, when the stock was, well, actually 2007 when it crashed, then in the end of the 2008 election, you have the coming of Barack Obama, and he has to do what? Give that money back to the Goldman Sachs, give that money back to Citigroup, Merrill Lynch, Bank of America, Countrywide, and the like. And that is why racism pays. Racism continues to pay. And as relates to Dr. King's birthday, of course, it's more symbolism than it is substance, isn't it? It's more symbolism than it is substance. And too often, as you look back historically, the gains that the black people have made in this country have been more symbolic than substantive. And we cannot live on symbolism alone. We need the substance of what we are working for and laboring for. And so the late Dr. Bell said that racism is a non-negotiable essential element of America as we know it. Emphasis on as we know it. There may be room for change, but it's going to be incremental because according to Dr. Bell's race theory, racism is indigenous to the political sociology and the political economy of this nation. America would not be America without racism. That means, according to Dr. Bell, that somebody must always be on the bottom. The value must always, the property value must, there's a value in whiteness, and there is a deficit or a loss of value in blackness. I've been given my signal that it's time to wrap this up. I don't want to end on such a hollow or downer because, as Dr. King said, his adversaries looked for him to become a grim and desperate man, but they failed to perceive the challenge, or the affirmation that was involved in accepting the challenge, embracing the struggle, and surmounting obstacles. He said it was life affirming. And that is what you and I must be about. We must be about our Father's business. Even as Jesus said, the poor you have with you always, racism you have with you always. That doesn't mean you can't beat it. That doesn't mean you can't win. That doesn't mean you can't push back the forces. Jesus himself said, this world belongs to the prince of this world. And he and I ain't got nothing to do with each other. But yet he came into this world to die for our sins, to redeem us from the law. So we likewise must pursue that same model, must pursue that same high transcendent goal, that recognizing what is in the heart of man, what man is, yet we labor for a better nation, a better day, a better community, a colony of heaven here upon earth. Maybe not utopia, maybe not today, but we continue to struggle. As I wrap it up, continue to pray for our healthcare workers. Thank God they're talking now about the possibility of a vaccine, which will surely be available. But our nurses and our doctors, our frontline defenders, no, not the police, the doctors, the nurses, the medical care, the people that drive the trucks, the people that stock the shelves, the meat cutters, the shippers, the people that work in all that, they need our prayers. And we must not let them down. And pray for a friend of mine named Lewis Brown. He's in the hospital with coronavirus right now, but he's in good spirits, hopefully to be dismissed from the hospital next week. God willing, keep him in your prayers. Again, to our brothers and our sisters that are laboring at these menial jobs where the folks don't like you, don't want you to have full time, just barely want you to have part time, don't want you to have a solid stable hours, know when you're going to come in, when you're going to be working. What they're telling you is they really don't want to pay you, and I tell you, as I say always, if they don't want to pay you, stop working for them. God bless you. Thank you, Doc. We out of here. Sing, Bruce. All of my good days.